This is Jerry Ewing, the editor of Prog Magazine, and I'm having a chat this afternoon with our guest, John Mitchell, the man behind Lonely Robot and Kino, guitar player with Arena, the Urbane, producer extraordinaire. Is there anything I've missed out there, John?
Frost.
Yeah, Frost.
But you have brought to my attention that I have probably done far too many things and need to stop a bit.
Well, I mean, this is one thing I was thinking of earlier on today when I knew that, well, obviously in the build up to sort of chatting with you. This sort of that sort of ubiquity is quite commonplace in the prog world, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. I mean, I think the thing though is, I mean, some people do a lot of things concurrently within the prog world. Actually, I suppose I do as well. So that's completely hypocrisy. I was going to say, but I don't do that. But well, I mean, you know, there are things that have come and gone in, you know, my life. I don't really do the Urbane anymore, so I have done that. And I suppose in terms of, you know, with Kino, that you know, that lay dormant and that jumped back into life, you know, a few years ago. You know, that things come and go. You know, I would suggest that perhaps that I have too much of a too many ants in my pants to stay still doing just one thing, you know. I'm a musical harlot.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of camaraderie, I think, in the prog world.
Yeah.
And you know, maybe because you have to work perhaps a little bit harder at getting recognition beyond, say, something like Prog Magazine, you know, into the mainstream. It forges that sort of, I wouldn't say siege mentality, but a camaraderie, I think, which sort of sees lots of people working with other people.
That's very true. I mean, you know, everybody. But it's funny, you know. Obviously, well, and that, I think that goes for the audience base as well. In that you know, there's a lot of people that I'm sort of friends with on Facebook who are sort of you know, acquaintances and peers. And you'll often see them posting something, and you'll see all the same people posting on that. As you see, it does seem like a big, sort of a big happy pond, as it were, of you know, the fans seem to sort of interact with all the different bands, and you know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing at all, because, for example, you know, from you we get Lonely Robot and we get Kino, you know, and any other musical endeavors and ideas you come up with.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're on the new Magenta album.
Yes. So that was a funny one, actually, because originally Rob rang me up and said, "Do you fancy singing some backing vocals?" And I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll do that." And I did some backing vocals, and then I could see the light bulb moment. If I turn him up a bit more with the fader, it becomes a duet. Ah, I see what you did there. So yeah,
I mean, yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, let's address the current situation, and I have to say how elegant you're looking, given the lockdown period that we've all endured. Unlike myself, of course, who appears to have turned into Captain Caveman.
It's a great. If I could grow a beard like yourself, I mean, and my friend Mick Pointer, he's grown a fantastic beard, and you know, there's a lot of beard envy here. I can't, because my stubble's all very patchy. So you know, I think I tried a goatee at one point in the early '90s, and that's as far. You know, I think somebody just called me a Cuban drugs dealer or something. So I promptly shaved that off, and have been shorn ever since.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for me, I go to the barbers and get my beard trimmed roughly every 6 weeks. I don't trust myself to do it, and I was probably a couple of weeks over that when lockdown hit. So I've literally, and now of course barbers are open again, but they're not really doing beards at the moment.
No, they're not.
And again, it's one of those things, I don't trust myself, because I'll go, oh, it's lopsided, and I'll end up with a pair of sideburns. So
yeah, I mean, you are going to have some fun with the beard when it eventually does get trimmed. I don't know if I recall a time that you haven't had a beard. To be.
No, well, there was a time when I used to shave it off once a year, and even about 4 years ago, I stopped doing that. So
yeah. Because
I mean, how did you find lockdown and that whole sort of time period? Which, I mean, we're not out of, but it seems that we're slowly sort of crawling back to whatever
Yeah.
new reality is going to face us.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously we got the news that we have to wear masks in shops now. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, I don't need to wear a mask clicking on Amazon, so I'm okay for that. Um, but I have found that there's a strange sort of duality in that, and you can go into a pub. Are you supposed to wear a mask in a pub, or
Well, how would you drink?
exactly?
Or yeah,
But anyway, yeah. Now, how have I found it? Well, to be honest with you, I think I'm not alone in this. But when I, trying to adjust to, I'm not very used to not seeing people. I have this thing when I'm at home, like in the studio or whatever. I at least need to go out once a day, and obviously that was that was the allowed period of time in which you're allowed to do stuff, exercise for half an hour. But I had a thing whereby I found myself the first couple of weeks just lying in a hammock and reading rock biographies, and I've got a fair few of those back there, and various things. So I hadn't really just done nothing, absolutely nothing, for quite a long time. I must say I'm quite a lazy so and so at the best of times, but I'm a bit like an old lawnmower, and then once you get me going, I'm quite hard to stop. An old Suffolk punch, but yeah, it's I don't know. Once I got past the initial couple of weeks of not doing anything, and going a bit bonkers, and I found myself starting to sort of be slightly more productive in that I started writing a book, which was quite good fun, and yeah, and started on the Frost guitars. So yeah, there's obviously no studio work because you obviously people aren't. It was kind of a strange thing for me because the calendar, the old studio calendar, was quite full. Um, and then all of a sudden, and it's like nobody even rang me up to go. Just by the way, I think it's a sort of an unspoken thing here, but we're not coming in the studio. It's just like people just didn't turn up. But I mean that's fair enough. I mean a courtesy call just to acknowledge the fact that that was going to be happening might have been nice. But yeah,
yeah.
that's the diary was fairly decimated. But I have managed to do a little bit of mixing in between. I mixed Doris Brendel's album, which is
Right.
out sometime soon. So that kept me busy for a little while, and been doing a lot of sailing. So that's been good.
Right. Yeah. I mean, my escapism was cycling.
Yeah,
Because obviously the magazine has kept going, even though we've been working from home. So, you can go a bit stir crazy. So, the great way to sort of clear your head would be get out on the bike for an hour and a half. The only problem now is that the traffic seems to have returned to normal. I was out yesterday for the first time in like 2 weeks because the weather hadn't been brilliant, and the traffic was, compared with what I was experiencing even 3 or 4 weeks ago. Obviously, there was a period during lockdown where it was absolutely wonderful to be out on the bike because there was hardly anyone on the road. The only problem was the one type of driver that did appear to be on the road was the one that was going to go at 150 miles an hour because he didn't think the police were around. So you had to keep your wits about you. But yeah, that's all.
yeah. So it's a kind of strange thing as well. I noticed that when this first got announced, I mean, a lot of people started acting as if it was like the Wild West or something.
Yeah.
Like that's just, it hasn't become lawless just because we've gone into lockdown, and you know. I do know some people that did actually get pulled over for driving around in their car, for non-essential activities. But for the most part, I mean, yeah, uh, um, yeah, it's pretty much back to normal, isn't it? I mean, obviously, I suspect that in a few months from now, we'll get the precious. Now it seems kind of, it's in hindsight, I mean, there was a lot of confusion about it, but I suppose looking back on it now, it was quite nice to have no cars on the road and to be able to walk around and
Certainly,
go around on a bike.
the air, certainly, I have to admit, I thought the air felt cleaner. You kind of got that thing that pollution was certainly down, and statistics seem to sort of bear that out. I suppose I should mention anyone watching this also, because I'm sure there'll be a reference to it at some point, that we were chatting roughly. Well, you actually instigated a kind of prog chat, weekly prog chat
Yeah.
with self and Mark from Quantum Pig.
And yeah, and our other erstwhile colleagues.
Yeah, Alexander Milas, head of Twin V, my old colleague from Future Publishing days quite a long time ago. Dr. Stuart Clark, the astronomer, author, and a group of us would convene. You more than me. I was Thursdays. The chosen day was always. I was just got
Fairly
zoomed
zoomed out by the time by the witching hour.
Yeah, so we'd have these very amusing and interesting prog chats that would run on till the often the early hours. But
Yes, indeed.
which I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, to see the way that everyone's sort of adapted very quickly to, oh, this is what we do now. You know, we don't go out, we connect like we are connecting now.
Well, exactly, and it was kind of a funny thing because I mean, I feel like I've got to know Alex a lot better
Yeah,
since this started. In fact, you know, Alex was, I think, I'd like to take credit. I think it was Alex that first put together. I don't think it was intended to be Prog Chat. I think I was feeling a bit down in the dumps, and he very sweetly sort of, you know, he got in touch and said, well, let's chat on Zoom. And then before you know it, we all got this unofficial sort of Zoom chat, you know, and now it's like the stone circle. It comes around but once a week, and yeah, it's kind of, I really, really, really cannot underestimate how much that has really saved my sanity. Just once a week, just chatting to, you know, yourself and everybody else. It really has. And you know, that first couple of weeks especially, and last week, I mean, it says we went down a Blade Runner rabbit hole,
all right.
which is a dark rabbit hole for me to go down because of my absolute unequivocal love for that film. So yeah, that was you know, and every week it's just fun. It's just nice to talk to like-minded people, really. But like I'd see Alex once every, you know, 3 or 6 months before, you know, I'd trek up to London. And of course now, you know, once a week, and you know, I feel like I know that the guy, you know, way better than, you know, it's quite the thing.
So, so obviously, let's talk Arena, get that out of the way, because obviously the last 2 days Arena have been all over the social media. Because first of all, the news that Paul Manzi had left was finally announced yesterday.
Yes.
Swiftly followed by the announcement that that Mr. Damien Wilson is your new singer.
That's correct.
Which is very interesting news, to say the least. And just judging from the reaction on our Prog Magazine social channels, a very popular one.
Yes. I mean, between me, you, and the Garden Gate, I think Damien's name has been thrown into the ring many times over the previous years.
Right.
I think I can say this now. He's actually a member of the band. That there have been times when things have become quite fractious in the fragile ecosystem of Arena, and perhaps people in the band within the inner circle of Arena have been looking for a convenient out. And Damien's name was, do you know what, we could save ourselves a world of pain if we just called Damien. It's like the backbone. And finally, you know, we found ourselves in this particular quandary. And you know, Damien's been a busy old chap over the years. He's done his, you know, he was in Les Mis, and then he was in Threshold again. And the rotating gate of Threshold was opened and closed several times for him. Rotating gate, that makes no sense. Apologies.
Revolving door.
Yeah, the revolving door, the leafy rural kissing gate of Threshold has opened and closed several times in the past, you know, couple of decades. But this time, you know, we find the stars have finally aligned, and the man from Del Monte, he say yes. So.
I mean, obviously, Damien is a great singer.
Yes.
He is a terrific frontman.
Oh, yes. I know. I did a little gig with him just before Christmas, before all this started in Holland. It was like a sort of Prog Proms, I believe it was called. And we both got enlisted to do this. And I sang a couple of songs, and he sung a bunch of songs. And I watched him from the side of the stage, and I thought, I know what's going to happen. He's going to go marching out there like a Viking with a sword, and he's going to jump into the audience, and he's going to do this, and I'm just going to sit there and sing a couple of ballads like some sort of some prog hucknall. And of course, yeah, there's no following that, and so that's good to have him. You know, good to have him on side in the band.
Of course, it hasn't escaped my notice. He also sports a fine and robust beard.
Yes, I mean, we had a socially distanced photo shoot the other day, and yeah, I mean, that's the first thing that struck me is, again,
I think actually, if you go back, Damien and I kind of first grew our beards roughly around the same time.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well,
sort of,
I mean, you know, you've got a lot more girth to yours. Damien's required quite a lot of. There was pomade and all sorts of things involved just before the photo shoot. I mean, I didn't know whether it was coming or going.
Between the first and second Headspace album, we would we'd meet up and check each other's facial hair out, facial topiary.
Facial topiary. I like that. That's excellent. Yeah,
Uh,
and between you and Pointer and Damien, there's a holy trinity of beards there.
yes.
You know,
Oh yeah.
oh yeah.
Um, well, Nolan, Pointer. I mean,
I
there's
think
great.
Nolan's tried the beard. He's always he's more his is more wizardy. Yours
I
is sort
remember.
of
Yes. Well, it's
yeah,
funny. Funny you should say that. When I interviewed Arena last, I went down to where Clive lives to interview him and Mick,
yeah.
uh, and they came and met me at the station, and we went to a curry house. And
Okay.
walking up the hill from the station to the curry house, uh, I think in the feature I likened it to the hobbits and that crossing the mountains. These three men of a certain age with the big beards.
And you've just reminded me. I can't remember what comedian it was said. When you were to sum up Lord of the Rings for you, it's 3 films about walking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So pity about Paul because again he was a very very good singer. Oh, he
Yeah,
still is a very
yeah,
good
yeah,
singer.
yeah. He still
Oh,
is, and that it's quite nice actually in this instance that there is, there is no bad blood between us.
cool.
Not to say in the past, I mean, we've had several lead singers. The sheriff's
Four, I
badge.
believe, up to
Four,
now.
four. Okay, ooh, frightening statistics. The sheriff's
I know
badge.
that 'cause I wrote the news story yesterday and today.
Oh, there, right, yeah. Well, there have been, there have been quite a few singers, and it's not always ended well. And in this instance, I think. I think Paul perhaps has been wanting a change for a while now, I think it's kind of one of those things that, to leave a band and to not feel like you're letting someone down or it's a difficult thing. I suppose it's like splitting up with a girlfriend, and he could have done the old Phil Collins fax routine, but no, it's all fairly amicable, and he wished me happy birthday shortly after we agreed that this was going to happen, and yeah, it's all fine. He's a nice guy.
I suppose really very exciting times then for Arena because you've got a new album that you're working on. I think Double Vision. Well, certainly that period with Paul as your singer certainly seems to. Sometimes with Arena it's peaks and troughs, isn't it? And sometimes the troughs can undermine the peaks, as it were. But I think
Yeah,
you've managed to, with this, certainly getting Damien in, it seems like you've just gone from there to there, kind of.
yeah. I mean, I think that Paul is a very difficult act to follow. There's not many people that sort of have the same. He
Yeah,
has a fantastic vocal range. I think something like 4 octaves, if I'm not incorrect. But I think the trouble with Arena, we've always had quite stylized singers, like with John Carson. I suppose realistically, it was quite like Fish. His tone was quite like Fish, and he sung with quite a hard falsetto, so it wasn't a natural tenor voice. And then after that, we had Paul Wrightson, who was sort of not necessarily the most natural singer, but certainly a more natural front man. And then we had my friend Rob, who was again like me, a baritone singer, couldn't necessarily always didn't have quite the same range as those guys, but had a nice tone. And then of course it was Paul Manzi, who had like the stratospheric high voice that and he kind of, when he sung some of the more baritone sort of range songs, it was difficult for him not to sound half asleep, because obviously it's a vocal range only sounds impressive when you push it to the max, when you put your foot on the throttle. And of course, him loitering around, an E above C is not really much in the way of sort of what I would describe as being effort required to do it. So yeah, and now it's kind of that since he joined, the trouble is that all the songs that we've written have got noticeably higher. And you can only really go one way with that, and that's somebody like Damien Wilson. And fortunately, we happen to have a spare Damien Wilson in the cupboard, waiting to go. So yeah,
I mean, well, yeah, I agree because I mean, going back to that time that I was in the curry house with Mick and Clive, I actually said to them, I said, keep hold of this one,
yeah,
Paul. I said, because I think you'll be in trouble if Paul ever goes. However, if anybody is the perfect fit to not only replace but to take the band on further,
Yeah.
the only man you could possibly think of would probably be Damien Wilson. So,
Well, exactly. So how convenient for us that it's kind of,
yes,
yeah, it's, you know, I've known Damien a long time, and you know, a lot of the people I know Damien. Like Lee Pomeroy did was in Headspace with him, and you know, he's much beloved, you know, amongst our community, as I suppose. You know, and you know, I had a great time with him at that gig before Christmas, and I've always got on really well with him.
oh, it's a
Um,
great laugh. It's
oh, he's
great
great.
fun.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. He's yeah. So I'm looking forward to that aspect of it. You know, not incredible vocals notwithstanding.
Yeah, great, great. Okay, well, I mean, let's move on to Lonely Robot, which of course was the actual idea behind doing this. Just every.
Lonely what? Lonely Robo. Yeah.
So you've got a new album coming out.
Yeah.
You must be relieved it's actually coming out now, because um, I guess you know things were being set up for a release, and all of a sudden COVID-19 appeared, and you know did it sort of send you in a bit of a tailspin of, oh my god, what's going to happen now?
Well, we did have a chat about it, and it was decided that you know, a lot of people have put their releases back. I suppose, you know.
Well, yeah,
I think Stevens put his back till December or January, I think.
January, yeah.
So, I mean, you know, I suppose that at the end of the day, it's you can't put everything back, can you? That, you know, the wheels of commerce need to keep moving, and I don't think it's proven too much of a hindrance. The only slightly difficult thing was sort of making some sort of accompanying videos, and I will remember this period of time in my history as the album that had several videos of me sitting down in a room. Yeah, he's not out and about today, but
Where
you
your
know,
imagination is forced to come to the fore, isn't it?
yeah. What can we do? Oh, yeah, let's get a projector out and pretend that we're outside. So yeah, that's kind of the, you know, the thing. But apart from that, I think that I was most concerned about the fact that whether we were going to, you know, get the right amount of promotion behind it, and whether we're not, you know, we were going to. I didn't want to sell it short, really, because I was just. I think, you know, it's a bit of a different album to the other three.
Well, I was going to say, you know, I must admit, I was surprised when I got a press release. I wasn't surprised there was new music coming from you, but I
Yeah.
was a bit surprised that there was another Lonely Robot album, because, you know, because of the so-called Astronaut trilogy.
Yeah.
You know, it seemed like that would be the beginning and the end of the whole project, because it was sort of centered very much around those three things. But now explain the reasoning to carry the Lonely Robot thing on.
Well, okay. So, I'm going to delve back into time as to why I even did this at all, because I'd never really, you know, I never got round to doing something largely ostensibly on my own. I don't think there's any great illusion. It's called Lonely Robot. I suppose. I think at the time it was just suggested to me that things that are potentially could be positioned as a band rather than a solo artist, or going under a solo artist name, tended to fare better commercially. I don't know the psychology behind it, but I just want to make music. I don't really mind what it's called. But certainly with that, I mean, in 2012 we made an It Bites Map of the Past, and I put I gave a lot of myself to that endeavor from day one, and it really disheartened me when we finished that album and it kind of got released, and there was just a bit of a, excuse my French, shitstorm that surrounded it, and I really didn't feel inclined. It wasn't anything to do with anybody in the band. It was, let's just say that we were kind of, at the time, there might have been a third party involved that kind of caused a bit of a bit of consternation. Anyway, long story short, we didn't really promote the album as best we could. I think we only ever did 5 dates, or we might have done the odd. I think we did a couple of shows with FM. Certainly, I wanted to do more with it and do more shows, and it just didn't really go the way I hoped it would go. It kind of, in a way, it kind of reminded me of the build up when we did the first Kino album. It didn't quite go the way I was hoping it would go. It didn't really play out. You know, you have all this sort of kinetic energy, potential energy that doesn't quite turn into kinetic energy when the thing is released. And so I just got disheartened by it. I thought, well, my goodness me, I've really gone to town with this album, and it's not going to go any further. You know, I felt that you know, I just couldn't be bothered with it anymore. I was like, not in a petulant way. I just thought, well, I don't really want to go down that road again. So we kind of parked it, and John Beck went off and started playing keys for Fish. We did start writing a couple of songs, and then we didn't really get any further with it because he became otherwise engaged. And then, you know, a couple of years went by when I didn't really do anything at all. And then, you know, I had a meeting with Thomas and Freddie, and they said, well, why don't you know, what about...
That's just for to, for people listening in, Thomas Varber, who is the head of Inside Out, and Freddie Palmer, who is I guess he heads the label up in the UK.
He does. I realise in saying that I sound like I had a meeting with a daytime kids TV show. Thomas and Freddie. No, I met up with Thomas and Freddie, and they said, well, you know, obviously Thomas, you know, he's a businessman, and I think he brought up the idea of doing another It Bites album, and I kind of defiantly said, no, I don't want to do that. Don't want to do, you know, I kind of dug, and I kind of said, well, why don't we do something else then? And so that's how it kind of came about. And I didn't really know what I was going to do. I hadn't a clue what sort of music I was going to make, and all I knew that was that it was a 3-album deal, and at the risk of sounding like that's why it's a trilogy. It's called a 3-album deal, everyone. But yeah, and I did it, and I really didn't have a clue. And I have to this day I cannot remember why. I can remember why I thought it'd be cool to call it Lonely Robot. The only thing I do remember was I jotted down some lyrics to the song Lonely Robot, which I didn't know was going to be called Lonely Robot. I had all the lyrics written to it and what it was going to be about, and I knew that I kind of I was massively into film music, and I didn't really know. And the name Lonely Robot actually comes from Sting's daughter is called Coco Sumner, and she had a project called I Blame Coco. And in that project, it was like a dancey kind of thing. And there was a song called Self Machine, and the chorus is something like "Lonely robot in a wasteland, rusting in a harbour's water" is the chorus lyric to that song. And I thought, wow, Lonely Robot, that sounds well cool. So I nicked it off Sting's daughter. Not that she cares. She's never heard of me. Never going to know about that. And that's how it sort of came about. And then before you know it, there's this whole sort of spacey sounding album. First album had lots of guests on it. And yeah, and then 3 albums later, I thought, right, well, it kind of felt like I wanted to make, I don't know, it just felt like there was always going to be like 3 of those albums in that style. And then I kind of thought, right, well, that's the end of that. Now I'm just going to make music under my own name. And then I kind of had another meeting, and it was suggested to me that perhaps, not a meeting, a phone call, and it was suggested to me that perhaps, like, you know, well, and I hate to sound like a marketing bod or anybody that, you know, it was suggested that the name Lonely Robot is kind of established now. Why not just keep releasing music under the name Lonely Robot? And so I did.
Right. I mean, you know, I think the first 3 albums worked brilliantly together. I mean, you know, it was a really good sequence of themes.
Yeah.
Connected. You know, I mean, I obviously sort of reached its apotheosis with that quite wonderful set of films that you created.
Yeah, I mean, I really was pleased that, I mean, that felt to me like that was the end of that, really, because it just, the way that whole thing ends, and the way that Miles put together, the video guy put that last sequence together, and it just, you know, if I get run over tomorrow by a large tipper truck, I can honestly say I would be happy with that, you know, just as something that I'm very proud of having, you know, been involved in, and you know, God bless Miles for you know, putting that together. And because I just remember when we, because every Lonely Robot album has been launched differently. The first one, if you remember, was at the Lexington. The second one was a gig in Reading, I believe, and then the following day, in the actual day of release, we supported Marillion at De Montfort.
Funny enough, Damien Wilson came with us to Reading gig.
Oh yes. There was a happy bus, wasn't there? There was a happy bus that was laid on.
Freddie Palmer laid on a bus to bus us down from, you know, some members of the press down from London.
Yeah.
And that day, Damien had got in touch with me and said, "Oh, I'm about. Do you want to go out for a drink?" And I said, "Well, look, we're going off to Reading to see John Mitchell launch his new Lonely Robot album. And he went, oh, could I come? And I said, well, ask Freddie, because Headspace are on the same label. I'm sure Freddie won't mind, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, and we got down to the bus, and there's Damien, and he came along, which is
I
some
didn't
kind
even
of
know that.
in a way, isn't it?
It is when you think about it. I did not know that. I mean, it was such a mad, you know, it's one of those venues where they have to get you out as quickly as possible at the end.
Yeah.
And I remember Peter came down, Peter Cox, and remember having to briefly say hello to him. I didn't even know that Damien was there. So now wow, well, there you go. There you go. I did not know that. There you go. I remember him. I remember he said something very sweet about the album in Prog Magazine at the time that it was released, and I thought, well, okay, I didn't even know you listened to it, but thank you, Damien. So yeah, it was kind of, and then the third one, of course, Freddie said, well, let's do it at a cinema, because obviously that's got a great sound system, and what better way to have a playback of the new album than at a cinema. And I said, well, what's going to be on the screen? And he was like, well, a static image. And I thought, well, hang on a minute. Ding, light bulb. Surely there's some way of creating an entire piece of visual accompaniment to the thing, which we did. And, you know, like Miles, bless him. I mean, the amount of effort he went to put that whole thing together, and considering he had very little time to do it, and it was a real labour of love for him. So, you know, I cannot say, you know, how much more, you know, I really appreciate the lengths to which he went to realise the dream, as it were, you know.
Because I mean, the other thing that the themes really of those first three albums has done for you has got you embroiled in the space world to a certain extent, hasn't it?
Yeah, how cool! I remember I did Space Rocks, and I remember thinking, "Hang on a minute." And Alex said, "Do you want to play this thing?" I said, "Why?" Well, because it's a space thing, and you're the only band that you know that is kind of space themed. And I thought, yeah, man, I've created my own sort of unique genre, which I get invited to space things, and I thought, cool. And you know, I went on podcasts about space things. I mean, I'm not, you know, I'm not a science guy, but you know, it was.
Yeah, I mean, to explain again to anyone watching this who sort of might not have sort of twigged the whole thing. Alex Milas used to be the editor of Metal Hammer. I think when we launched Prog Magazine, he's been a friend of mine for quite a long time, anyway. And he was just getting to a point where he was going to be leaving Metal Hammer. And I remember he talked to me at work. He said, look, I've got this idea for this thing. He's very interested in space, and he connected with ESA, the European Space Agency, and they were talking about getting involved. And he just had this idea for this thing called Space Rocks, which is effectively trying to unite the worlds of rock music and space, astronomy, really. And I remember we just had a brief kind of conversation at work, and I was just like, wow, dude, that is just so prog. You know, if you get this up and running, we will back you 100%, because I can't think of anything more prog than space and music, you know.
No, yeah.
It just seems to connect really well. And of course, the more we've got into it, it really does, because you've got people like Mark McCaughrean, who's very high up at ESA, the European Space Agency. I actually met him for the first time going to see you play at, I think it was the Frost show at Frostbites.
That's right. Yeah, that was at the Scarlet. He's a huge Frost fan, you know.
You know, and obviously Mark is very very important at ESA and heavily involved with Alex Milas in Space Rocks.
Yeah.
And like I said, we got the author and what actually does Stuart Clark? He's an author, isn't he? And he's
an author. Yeah, he's
Dr. Stuart Clark, is it?
That's all you need to know. He identifies as a doctor, Dr. Stuart Clark.
But you know, there's so many people that sort of seem to be involved who in the sort of more sort of scientific side, who are massive prog fans.
Yeah, that's right. I know, and they all hide in plain sight, don't they? That's the thing about prog, you know. All these people throughout the years, you know, secretly hiding away. The likes of Nick Kershaw, Johnny Rotten. Oh my God, someone's at the door. Who can it be? Hold on, hold that thought. Well, this is perfect timing. Okay, it's Amazon. Well, I'm gonna very quickly show you, Jerry, whilst we're on the call, is this here is a picture frame, and in it is four cats, four cats rather. And now, in a matter of hours, instead of four cats, there are going to be four of the Feelings Are Good postcards, each signed and mounted. You see, and what there's going to be, there's going to be a giveaway. Competition and giveaway. So that was remarkably good timing that should turn up there.
In process.
Yes, exactly. You know, life is actually, you know, unraveling as we speak. So yeah, but
of course, the new Lonely Robot album is, of course, Feelings Are Good. Yes. Should we tie up the space side before we move on to
yeah, let's get the space thing. Well, like you said, you know, like all these, like John, as I say, Johnny Rotten, you know, was a kind of very disparaging about the world of prog and the dinosaurs of prog. But you know, wasn't he a Van der Graaf fan? Didn't I hear that?
And Peter Hamill. So
yeah, I think even like Noel Gallagher famously said that, you know, he knows every single guitar lick on the Wall, and you know, you wouldn't have him down as a fan of that sort of thing. But then again, of course, you could argue, is the Wall a prog album? Well, yes, it is, but let's not get into that.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, that must have been great for you, because you've got a huge interest in all that. Certainly, as we all saw with the whole visual presentation of the third Lonely Robot album down at the cinema in King's Cross.
Yeah, we did two showings of it. We did it at King's Cross, and then we did it at, was it Upper Street, Screen on the Green?
Screen on the Green.
We're a very, I don't know, were you there at that one?
I didn't like that one, no.
That was it. No, Dave Ling was there, and there was a hugely entertaining and slightly inebriated Roland Rivron was hosting that. Which is, again, what on earth were the events in my life that brought me to that moment where Roland Rivron was MC at a Lonely Robot launch gig? But he was, and it was tremendously good fun. I just remember we had these two directors' chairs at the back, you know, to do the sort of the Q&A with the microphones, and he pushed them aside, and we sort of sat on the edge of the screen with our legs dangling over like a couple of school children and just sort of riffed off each other. It was brilliant fun.
Well, I mean, of course, these things, when you get people like Roland Rivron involved, when you get involved with something like Space Rocks,
yeah,
what it does is it takes you out of, say, the comfort zone of the prog blanket and presents your music to a potentially wider audience. Now, I've long maintained, certainly with modern progressive music, that people really only need the chance to hear it to realise that it's not actually week-long keyboard solos, and in fact could be something they actually quite like. And you get someone like yourself, or the year later Anathema involved with it, you know, Space Rocks, and not everybody that's going to attend something like that is actually going to be a prog fan. They're going to be interested in space, and it kind of all helps in the whole process of sort of potentially widening your audience. I mean, you know, your music specifically always has had a very melodic sound.
Yeah.
You know, certainly the stuff you've been involved with, where you do the bulk of the writing, but even things like Frost and Arena are very melodic.
I mean, Arena is something that I'm less involved in, and that's more of a sort of Clive process, but you know, I collaborate towards it. But you know, ostensibly, yeah, I mean, I think you know, with Jem and certainly with John Beck, you know, it's always about just you know, jerry rigging a pop song and just, you know, doing the accordion on it, and that's all that, you know, that's you know, that's the I think a lot of prog bands miss that point. You know, they think if you get two you know, sort of dissonant bits of music and glue them together, that makes prog. But actually, that's complete nonsense. You know, prog is about taking a very simple idea and just extrapolating on it. Not you know, not going, well, if I get this screwdriver and this phone and glue them together, that's a prog song. That's not a prog song. That's a screwdriver glued to a phone. You know, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So if you get past that,
and you know, certainly in the modern phase of or the current phase of progressive music, you know, you do get musicians like yourself who can cram more into a 3.5 minute song perchance than some bands from the 70s could manage in a 10-minute song.
Yeah, it's got nothing to, but unfortunately, you know, there is a sort of a narrative that, or not a stigma, or a narrative that sort of runs through progressive rock, where things do have to be a certain length, sir. and it's kind of, to me, it's absolutely nonsense. So I went, obviously, I'm a complete hypocrite. The first Kino album, we started with like a 10-minute song. The whole album started, you know. But it's so often, more often than not, it gets misunderstood and it misappropriated, and it's really not difficult. You know, we were having a chat on the space on the prog chat the other day about what are the pop bands hiding in plain sight, clearly playing prog music, and we agreed that, you know, a lot of for example, Tears for Fears, a lot of what they did, you see them live. So a lot of these sections, like you know, they took that section and they did it in a different time section. It's like, it's quite obvious what's going on. It's just that, you know, you don't have to do the cut and shut Ford Anglia, you know, Vauxhall Chevette thing where these two bits of music clearly don't go together for the sake of calling it a long song that is progressive. At the end of the day, the song has to, the song is king. The top line, the melodic, you know, and more than anything, you know, the lyrics are king, really. The vocal top line and the lyrics. I mean, forget about all the wizardry and all the sort of you know, the virtuoso playing. Forget all that. I mean, obviously I'm going to say that because I can't do it, but if you strip all that aside, it is ostensibly the things that appeal to me about the bands that I like are, like, for example, Roger Waters. I mean, what an incredible lyricist. But, you know, outside of that, I really like Justin Curry from Delamitri, and he's one of the best lyricists ever. You know, I mean, the lyric is everything to me, and what the guy is singing about. And I have to be able to relate to the guys, you know, that there's a real sort of sincerity, a believability in the vocal, and also what he's singing about. And that seems, sometimes it just gets like, oh, well, what? Okay, well, we've written this really complicated long thing that goes on for a year, and we've got the Vauxhall Chevette and the screwdriver and the phone, and we've glued it all together. Now we need to write something or sing something on top, and it leaves me cold. I don't understand. It's like, what are you doing, man? What you're writing about, the whole mood is dictated by what you're writing about, and the essence of what, you know, the way you sing it and the way you present it. That's the thing that makes music believable to me. So, you know, when Roger Waters is screaming, you know, or singing Vera Lynn, and when, you know, he's talking the whole song about, well, any of that on that album, it's like you really believe that he feels passionately about it. Even when he's singing woefully out of key, you still go, well, it doesn't matter. It's Roger being Roger, you know, delivering this, you know, it's almost the fact if he was a brilliant singer, it wouldn't be quite as convincing or believable, because it's that vulnerability in his voice that makes it sound so, you know, something that I really, when I'm just talking about it now, I can feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up on end, which is really weird. But it's something that for me is absolute king, you know, above everything else. You know, and if you do happen to do a Widley guitar solo, a beautiful guitar solo, or whatever, and it makes people go, well, he can play guitar a bit, or that's a great keyboard solo, that's the icing on the cake. Yeah, that's you know, you can't have a rusty chassis on your car.
So, I mean, the new album's called Feelings Are Good.
Yeah.
And obviously you've had to step away from the themes of the first three albums.
That's correct, yes.
So now in the press materials that have been released so far, you've talked about, you know, you've got an axe to grind, you've got stuff to get off your chest, and you've used Feelings Are Good to do that. So do you want to extrapolate on that and tell us a bit more about what it is that you...
What is it you're so angry about, Mitchell? Oh, there's a couple of songs in there that, you know, there's a couple of things that, you know, okay, I'll pick the one that is least personal to me, or not least personal, but, well, no, it's not least personal, it's extremely personal. There's various songs. I mean, the song Spiders, for example, is about when I was about shortly after my dad died. There was a lady who sort of entered into the sort of family subconscious, who was my dad's secretary. Now, before you go any further, no, it wasn't like that, because there is that sort of cliche in England, is it? Oh yeah, the secretary of the guy at work. No, it wasn't like that. But she was disingenuous, and it kind of stayed with me. And it's not like I wake up every morning going, damn that woman, you know. It's just about the fact that it always resonated with me. That's the first time in my life that somebody had put themselves into my put themselves onto my radar as a friend, as a friendly face, somebody that could be trusted. She lived in Morden, and I remember a couple of times, you know, she looked after me, and my parent, my dad was always kind of busy and whatnot. So she was a friend of the family, and she took me away. And I remember at the time her asking me all these like quite leading questions, like about is your, because my there's my dad had quite a checkered history with alcohol and all sorts of things. But he suffered a lot in his life. He'd had a lot of ups and downs. And I remember this woman like was genuinely seemed to be concerned about my welfare and my family's welfare, and etc. 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 And it only turns out shortly. I remember this is the first time when you really think, when you're growing up, and you think, well, I trust that person. That person's got my back. And certainly shortly after my dad died, and we found that she had ostensibly, and she was the executor of his estate, and so she had a great deal of power over, as a signatory in a lot of his things, and she kind of changed some of the terms and context of his will, presumably when he was, not powerless, but perhaps under the influence,
Yeah.
not in a particularly, not of sane mind and body, and she'd signed off on this, and I just remember the first thing that happened was that he had he worked in London a lot, and he had a little dwelling in London. I say a dwelling; it was a little flat. So because so he could be near the,
Yeah.
near the action, and it was sort of in near the city. And I had all his like worldly belongings and all the things that he brought back when he was in Africa, because he met my mum in Africa, and there was a lot of not that this really matters in the grand scheme of things. It's just stuff, and I don't want to sound like it's just the fact that this woman really ingratiated herself to us. And yeah, so when he died, my mum went up to London to see what was going on, and she changed all the locks on his flat, and then a couple of weeks later it was completely empty, and she just cleared everything out. And I just remember thinking at the time, wow, I didn't know that, because you're young and you just don't think, well, really, would somebody actually go to that lengths to say, right, I wheedle their way into your trust, and then to do something like that. And at the time there was a lot of things that she hadn't signed off on, and my dad, when he died, like left my mum with about £70,000 worth of unpaid tax, which was a lot of at the time, and she was supposed to be in charge of a lot of that stuff. So basically, it was about this woman. The thing that really did it for me was whilst this was all going on, it was during around the Easter time, and she sent myself and my sister a couple of Easter eggs. And I remember my sister jumped up and down on hers and sent it back to her, which you can argue is rather petulant. But it's not. See, it's about the fact that, as you go through life, there are sort of seminal moments where you think, right, well, that's the moment I really sort of started learning what people can be like. And then this is, so that's kind of, it's quite early on in the album. That's kind of sort of, it covers that for me.
I've got to ask, what do you find easiest as somebody that creates? Where you have, I mean, I don't know, would you say that Feelings Are Good has an overall overarching concept, or it's a collection of songs? And if it is it easier when you've got something like, you've got that Lonely Robot trilogy, the Astronaut trilogy, and that theme is strong and you can work around that? Do you find it easier to write for something where you've got a concentrated theme, or is it easier to write for just an album that it would be a collection of individual songs? Or is there no real difference here? It doesn't really matter one or the other.
I really haven't ever thought about it. I think the only thing that I have learned in the time that I've been doing this, and I'll let you in on a little secret, is that well, it's not really a secret because I go on about it mercilessly in everything I ever talk about, but that if you write to a title, as you've written books, and you know that if as a writer, that if you write to a title, or well, certainly you wouldn't go into the process of writing a book without knowing exactly what the subject matter is, or what you're trying to cover, or just as an author or a journalist, or you know that this is we're gonna, and how exactly the form. You start like this and you end like this, and there has to be a natural sort of wave to the whole thing. And I certainly am very aware of the way that wave works musically. And the only way I can describe the way that I get stuff done at all is the fact that I write to a title. And I know once I have I have a list before I even start an album. I have like a list with about 14 or 15 titles or words or just things that have really caught my imagination. Because words, to me, I mean, like, you know, English, you could argue, it's not the most beautiful language. You could argue that French is a prettier sounding language, but English has got such incredible turns of phrase and things that, you know, when you think about them, just you know, there's always that sort of hidden meaning behind a lot of sort of sayings in English, and so I always like writing to a title, and once that's in place and you've got a title, I would literally get up in the morning when I do this album or any other album and go, today we are going to write a song called Life is a Sine Wave, or, you know, keeping people as pets. And once you've got that, you know, just those words in my head say, right, well, this song is going to sound, I mean, I knew exactly when I had that song that it was going to be kind of, not urban, but it was going to be kind of, it's going to sound a bit like inner city, or, you know, it was going to have that kind of real longing about it, you know. And it really, to me, it's such a simple process when you have that like initial coat hook in place and you go, right, the song title, that's the coat hook. Or it's the little cloud, right? It's the little cloud, the song title, and it starts raining and everything falls into place. And I know that's kind of really a Zen way of looking at it, but for me, it really I cannot underestimate enough. And to the point when we did the Tall Ships album with It Bites, I didn't really know what any of the songs were going to be about. I know that I always wanted to start an album with the lyric, "Oh my God, the genius of it all." I used to say to a friend of mine, the opening lyric of any album is the most important lyric on the album. And I don't know why I said that, but I kind of invented that law for myself. So I thought with that album, "Oh my God, the genius of it all." So I knew that was going to be, I thought the title, "Oh my God," was quite a cool title, because, you know, I just thought, oh my God, you know. And anyway, the point is, later on in the album, I was going, well, what can we write a song about now? And I remember turning around like this and looking at the bookshelf, and just behind that chair there are about 5 books in a row. I don't know, I'll have to pull that away, but just trust me on this. There are 5, I don't know if it's that shelf there or that shelf there. There were 5 books in a row. And one book was called The Tall Ships. Another one was called Great Disasters. Another one was called The Wind That Shakes the Barley. And another one was called This Is England. And I just, every day I went, well, that sounds like quite a, you know. And obviously they're book titles. But, you know, Great Disasters is a book about maritime disasters at sea. But the song isn't about that. It's about being in a relationship where you spend more time arguing, but ultimately in some way it's more fulfilling because it's the makeup, you know, which is the kind of, you know, it's about 2 people that aren't necessarily best suited to each other, but, you know, seem to, you know, that's what that song was about then. And you know, so the whole thing, it became this whole, and that's how that whole album was written, just by looking at the spines of books. And I know that anybody that likes that, I'm going, well, that's a bit of a cop out, but the basic principle of that kind of stayed with me ever since that. And every song that I've ever written has been about, you know, a title. And certainly with this album, it starts off with a really, really delicate sort of a cappella kind of vocodary kind of sound thing. And then the first song, the way I see that album is like the moments throughout my life that these things where you learn this next thing about what happens in life and how these things all affect you, to the point where it ends up with the song "Grief is the Price of Love," which is the horrible realization that you have to go through this process, that if you love something, eventually it's going to hurt you because it's not going to be around anymore, which is a terrible juxtaposition of fact, I suppose. You know,
it's a cheery album, then.
Sorry. Oh yeah, it's my laughter marathon. Yeah. This is you're gonna have a party this summer. Stick that on. This will really cheer you up. It's you know, but I mean the songs, whether or not, forget what the lyrics about, the songs.
Stephen Wilson a run for his money then.
Yeah, free razor blade with every album sold. But yeah, it is what it is, and certainly this album I found it in many ways. I mean, because I didn't know, you know, that I knew that, you know, with the first 3 that there was always going to be this ethereal kind of sound running through it, this kind of this kind of like, you know, there's a lot of and sort of soundscapes and things that tied it all together, and it kind of made it, you know, made it really. But with this, get rid of all of that, and I had completely different instruments, VST instruments that I was playing, different sounding keyboard sounds, different drum sound, you know, and I wanted the vocals in places to be a lot drier. I wanted the whole thing to be just a bit more sort of lo-fi, or, you know, not grungy, but just a bit sort of bit more gritty than it has been, you know, because those first 3 albums, you know, by the time I got to the 3rd one, they had a real sheen about them, you know, whereas this, I wanted it to be a little bit more sort of downplayed, as it were.
Now I'm assuming this was all written and ready to go before the pandemic kicked in.
Oh God, yeah. This was. I think this was finished. It was supposed to be finished in right at the end of December. For some reason, the deadline was about 3 days before Christmas, and I remember getting really worried about this deadline. Then it occurred to me one day, who the hell's going to need an album 3 days before Christmas? Like, wait, okay, everybody, Christmas isn't cancelled. Mitchell's handed his album over. We can continue. But of course, it didn't. No one was going to do anything. It wasn't going to get it wasn't going to get put into the sort of release schedule until I'd handed it over, which at the end of the day was sort of mid-January, I think. So this was about 6 months ago. So this with all the albums. I mean, this is what people think. You think that they think you finish it, and then you toss it over the garden wall, and there it is. But no, this obviously these things. Inside Out, I've got a lot of releases, and you have to fit into the release schedule, and you've got to make sure you don't release it the same week that somebody else is doing something or whatever.
Yeah.
To
I
give
mean, obviously, some albums, as you said, got delayed. We're moving into a period now where it seems a lot of labels are getting stuff out. Some bands clearly didn't mind releasing stuff whilst the pandemic was ongoing, but a lot of labels, for whatever reasons, and some of them are financial, some of them are artistic, have held stuff back, and now we're getting a big deluge of stuff.
yeah.
But fortunately, I think in terms of your own label, one of the first people that are getting through the doors and out into the great wide open.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I having spoken to various people about what they're doing, obviously, like a high, quite, Stephen Wilson's album is, it's a bit more of a big deal than little old me, but it makes perfect sense for because it's quite for his label, it's quite a flagship album. They want to give it their everything has to be in place, and I think a lot of I think I was speaking to him and he said that it was to do with certain aspects of the production of the media or the production media, and I think it was being released in certain formats couldn't be done at the moment because certain factories weren't operating, as well as the fact that it needs it wants as much of a push as it can get at the right time. And
It's it's weird, even in terms of the magazine coming out. We were kind of we knew what we could do, as in the people that put that magazine together. So at our end, everything was fine. But when the pandemic actually hit and things started, we actually didn't know if the printing presses would run.
yeah,
Would they have enough members of staff to print the magazines?
yeah.
A lot of people watching this won't realise that magazines only get printed in the downtime when the newspapers aren't being printed.
Oh wow.
The printing presses are for the newspapers, and it's only cost effective to print magazines when the newspapers are, and then you put the magazines plates on and print those out sort of like throughout the night while you're waiting for the next sort of newspaper thing to come along.
Yeah.
We didn't know if there was going to be if the transportation links were going to work. If they did manage to get the magazine printed, was there going to be anyone to drive it to the distribution plants? Would there be anyone at the distribution plants to make certain that it got to the shops? Would there be anyone in the shops to get it on the shelves? Any one of those links breaks and the chain is screwed.
Yeah.
We're incredibly lucky that somehow obviously some shops closed and most magazines have taken a hit on sales. Sales over the counter though, we obviously went into overdrive pushing digital editions of the magazine.
I was going to say, I imagine that must have taken over a little bit, the digital sales.
Well, the initial results started to come through once we were in a situation where we weren't putting the magazines out normally, as it were. Was that Classic Rock Magazine and Prog Magazine? You got to remember, Future has hundreds of titles. Prog Magazine and Classic Rock Magazine had the biggest uptake on digital, which is great because as people want their dose of music, it means a lot to them. But that's, if you think that's just what it was for us as a magazine, how that affects the whole chain for a record company.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've never actually sort of had a breakdown of what percentage of my. I mean, it's quite funny now when I talk about CDs, I do feel like granddad. It's like, really, are people still buying CDs? I mean, I know that people buy vinyl because it's cool, it looks cool on walls, but I have no idea whether I sell it more in digital or in fact, to this day, the whole thing is a bit of a mystery, and like I realise that everything's more geared around Spotify. I'm a bit suspicious of Spotify because it still doesn't feel like it's monetized correctly. But
I think we all agree with that.
I think I'm not exactly. I'm not exactly. It's not new news, is it really? But
No.
so yeah, I realise it's a necessary evil in terms of getting your music. It's like it's the carrot and the stick, isn't it? Spotify, um, or it should be at least anyway. But certainly, I still like tactile contact with physical products, and I understand. I believe that a lot of people in the world of prog, the wide world of prog, are probably the same. Because I'm not suggesting that there aren't young people that like progressive rock, but obviously there's a large demographic of people that do still
There's
hark back to a time when they
you're
do
seeing
like tactile contact.
you're seeing signs of a sort of shift, but yeah, by and large, it's people want, you know, they want their hard product. We obviously, if you looked at air freight routes, got very limited during the pandemic, and the costs went through the roof.
Yeah,
So just for example, Future took the decision that subscription copies would be stockpiled because it
yeah,
was just, I mean, at a time when we had no, financially, no one knows what is happening, apart from the fact that your overall income is plummeting. Um, you know, and they would send out a digital editions to those people, and then their magazines would be posted on once everything is sort of settled back down.
right. So
Uh,
they get an advance party, and then once
so
once
basically, they get the digital mag, and eventually they'll have the print copy.
okay.
But we had some
I mean,
choice comments, people telling us what they thought of the whole idea of getting a digital copy. Wasn't for them. Um,
well, I know, but that's.
Colourful language.
Well, I know. I can imagine, though. A lot of people like prog rock have probably got that sort of folk fan mentality where they probably want it on a scroll, surely.
Possibly.
But I remember
Yeah.
you were saying about this. I remember one of the things that was quite telling was during the middle of this this lockdown business. For some reason, one evening I decided that I needed a toy Luger from eBay. I have absolutely no idea why. Right. Oh, look at that. I remember that from when I was a kid. That toy Luger by Lone Star. You remember Lone Star? They made cap guns. I thought I must have it. I thought I must have that toy Luger. And of course, it was in America, wasn't it? And so I got it. I bought it from America, and I got it shipped to a friend of mine, who subsequently sent, because they wouldn't ship to the UK. And he said, right, well, this is what it's going to cost us. Okay, fine, send it on. And I don't think it's ever taken anything quite so long to get from America. It only turned up about a week ago. It took about 4 months to get here.
Surprised you didn't have customs officers knocking on the door going, "What's this, sir?"
No, I knew, but I did again because it came from America and everything was under such scrutiny. But look, hang on, I'll show you. Look, see? When I think of lockdown, I think of that, right? Okay? That's what I'm going to take away from lockdown. The amount of time it took for that button click to get here. And that was about, I don't know, 4 months or so.
Oh, so it must have been incredibly frustrating for you, sitting on an album, and then I mean, we're all in a situation if we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, some people have gone, all right, well, that album's out. We're just going to write another one now because,
well,
obviously you can't tour.
yeah, well, this is it. And of course, everyone's, I mean, everybody suddenly turned into a bedroom troubadour, haven't they? One's like suddenly done bedroom concerts, and I've done my best to sort of steer clear of that because, well, I'm not trying to steer clear of it. I was involved in the Prog at Home thing, which was good fun to do. Prog from home thing. But no, on the whole, the only thing I have managed to do, well, I say start writing an album. I kind of already had half an album written, but it wasn't for me. It was one of the things that did come about throughout this whole pandemic is we did sign another It Bites contract. So we've come full circle. You see, 2012, Disgruntled Mitchell. Here we are, 2020 pandemic signature new album. So there we go. And yeah, just as soon as you know that is on the. I've signed a contract now. So come hell or high water, we are.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you say, because Feelings Are Good is out.
July 3 days time. July no. Well, depends how when this chat is being released, but certainly any moment now.
Yeah, I think it's out on Friday then.
Friday, yes.
Okay, so you can't tour it at the moment, but you do. Are those dates in December that have been?
They're loitering. They're floating around the waiting room of sort of. There's no certainty with them. I do know that one of the things I did say to the label guys was that let's just put a sticker on the album advertising the dates either way, because of course, you know, if you like Lonely Robot and you get the album, and that's one, you know, it's not free advertising, but you know that the word's going to get out there, of course. And you know, prog gigs famously quite hard things to get, you know, certainly in the country of England, people to attend, but certainly I just wanted to make sure that we had that sticker with the dates on. And you know, it might well be that it comes to pass that these dates don't go ahead, and you know, everybody needs to go around with set squares and rulers behind, making sure they're not too close to each other. I mean, I'll be sad that they if they don't go ahead, obviously, but you know, needs must, and onwards. But at some point,
we just don't know what. I mean, we still are in that we don't know kind of thing, because we don't know what's going to happen. You know, restrictions. It might work. We might be hit with second wave, and we have to take a step back and everything. So yeah. I hope so, because I'm really looking forward to seeing live music again, and I'm sure a lot of people. I'm sure you're looking forward to playing it. I'm sure a lot of the people watching this are in the same boat. You know, itching to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm more looking forward to. I mean, I've when pubs reopen. I must say I haven't been anywhere near a pub. I mean, I always like going to a pub for Sunday lunch, but I haven't been near a pub since they've reopened. I'm not really champing at the bit for that. I am very much looking forward to you know, some sort of, I don't know. I do miss going to London and hanging out in London and going to see gigs there, and just going and, like, for example, when was the last time the Crowbar was frequented, for example? You know, it was a long time ago, and I miss the social element of that, and I do miss. I mean, there are some gigs that the last gig I went to see was the Midnight at the Roundhouse, and that was a brilliant gig. And I know I've just noticed they've announced some more tour dates. I'm absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'll be sad if December doesn't go ahead, because it would be a cool thing, and I always kind of like gigging just before Christmas because it gives me a fuzzy feeling.
So is the Bites project, is that the next thing on the agenda though for you musically, or?
Well, musically, we're finishing the Frost record.
Frost.
Yeah, that's kind of a, you know, it's the way that Jem and I wrote about 6 songs. He hired a cottage in Cornwall just before the end of last year, and we went there and we wrote 6 songs in 5 days. And then the most amazing thing happened in January. He said, well, we should do that. That went really well. Let's do it again. And this time he hired a Coast Guard's lookout tower in Dungeness, which was about 10 meters from the sea. And it's this old, really sort of functional looking building from the outside. You know, with just you know, and it was to the right, 200 meters to the right was a nuclear power station, and then you look to the left and it's just windward, and all you could see was surrounded by sea, and the nearest, you know, habitation was Dungeness. I mean, if anybody's been to Dungeness, they know what it looks like. But we were like literally, and we set up a little. We kind of had these jerry rig studios that we kind of put together, and we built one in the roof of this, and in the top story of this Coast Guard's lookout, and it was just panoramic view of this raging sea for this entire week, and we just sat there recording, and I think we wrote another 4 songs, and it was just you know, and it really informed the music that we wrote. And I never think that, you know, it was kind of really bleak. I was saying, so if you're looking for another laughter marathon with the new Frost album, look elsewhere, because this is one of the songs that we wrote on this particular occasion are very bleak indeed. But yeah, and so that's the, we've got to bring that to its, we've done a lot of the donkey work with that, and Jem's obviously got some other stuff he's got to write, but we're kind of putting that together at the moment, and it's been going incredibly well.
Right, and then maybe it bites.
Well, not maybe it bites. If I don't do this It Bites album, I'll have the legal department from inside out chasing me halfway across. No, I have to do it. No.
And how about production work? Are people actually phoning you back up now, going, "Can we come down the studio?" Or
Well, funny enough, no, not really. I don't know if I should say this. I had an email from somebody, and it was the first studio inquiry I've had in some time. I mean, I think just people haven't just. I mean, there's a few things. Like I said, I've done a bit of mixing and I've done a bit of overdubbing and various little bits and bobs. But this was the first email I've had from my studio website that came through today, and it said, "Hi, I just want to get a price for how much it's going to cost to record. I just want one song, please. No mixing, no mastering. I want to be recorded by a white male." I thought, what? You can't say that. It's 2020. Who are you? It's like, well, who am I recording? Why do I? No, well, I am a white male, I suppose.
Some strange things to people.
Well, yeah, no, I want to be recorded by somebody that's amazing at recording. I want to be recorded by a white male. What is this, a Klan rally or something? I mean, ridiculous. Yeah, I'm sorry. We can always edit that out later. That's my first studio inquiry in ages, and that's the only criteria. My ethnic demographic and my sex. That defines the whole. That's the tipping point for this particular booking.
Oh dear. But right, so Feelings Are Good is released on Friday. It's the 17th of July. That's So what I'll probably do is I'll get this up on the Prog website for Friday morning. So it's out all day and from then on. But yeah, listen, John, stay on the line, but I'm going to stop recording this in a sec. But thank you. It's been a good laugh. It's great as always. A great chat, and the best of luck with the album.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Thank you.